Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've been keeping tabs on global politics, you probably have a pretty set idea of China and its place in the world, right? But here's the thing. For years, the narrative we've been fed in the West has been shaped by ideas that are, honestly, dangerously out of date. Today, we're doing a massive reality check. We've got recent on-the-ground reports from Western journalists, mixed with some heavy-hitting historical data, and it is literally shattering those old mental models. We are going to dive deep beneath the surface, the whole iceberg, of this new global power shift and see exactly how it's challenging American dominance in a way we haven't seen in over a century.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to hit the tech reality check, dive into the surveillance trade-off, unpack the historical drivers, look at tech independence, and finally, break down this historic power shift. We're going straight from the wild, surface-level tech visitors are seeing right now, all the way down to the deep geopolitical bedrock.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the tech reality check.
This has been a massive wake-up call lately. Western observers, really seasoned reporters, recently hit the ground in China and were just floored. The tech integration into everyday life is so seamless it's almost invisible. To give you a super specific example from our sources, a reporter parked illegally on a city street. Well, it took exactly 2 minutes for them to get an automated ticket pinged straight to their phone. 2 minutes. Now, depending on how you look at it, that's either a marvel of absolute civic efficiency or kind of terrifying, right? But just think about the sheer back-end horsepower required to pull that off instantly across a huge metropolitan grid. The sensors, the data processing, the automated enforcement, it proves this is a society operating on a completely different digital frequency than what we're used to.
And this AI push isn't just in traffic cams, it's right there in everyday life. Reporters checked out a Family Mart. Think of it like your local convenience store, but absolutely spotless. Inside, a humanoid AI robot named Galbot is handling orders. And these aren't just fragile little prototypes rolled out for a PR stunt. No way. They are fully operational in 50 different pharmacies and warehouses, quietly handling over 300,000 orders so far. But here's the crazy part. There are absolutely zero physical security guards. None. At a time when stores in the West are dealing with rampant shoplifting and locking items behind plexiglass, the very idea of stealing from the store is just considered completely preposterous. Plus, people there actually love it. They embrace the tech as a totally standard convenience without that heavy skepticism or fear of robots taking their jobs that we see so often back home.
So the crucial takeaway here is this wildly jarring contrast it creates between the two global powers. Our sources point out that right now, Americans are constantly dealing with this sense of domestic friction, Flying into aging airports, dodging potholes, paying higher consumer costs, and just feeling this general vibe of decline. Meanwhile, the Chinese public is experiencing the exact opposite trajectory. They're hopping on networks spanning 300-mile-per-hour bullet trains, driving incredibly cheap, totally dominant domestic EVs, and living in these rapidly modernizing, clean cities. It fuels this incredibly powerful domestic narrative of unstoppable progress.
Which brings us to Section 2, the surveillance trade-off.
Because, look, you don't get zero crime and spotless streets by accident, right? There's a massive cost to this pristine efficiency. The sources describe a social contract that is vastly different from anything we're used to in the West. To get this hyper-order, a population of 1.4 billion people basically acquiesces to an absolutely immense level of digital tracking. We're not just talking about some abstract social credit score here. We are talking about your face being automatically scanned by cameras just across the street safely. Your ability to move between cities can be heavily restricted or require explicit digital permission based on state parameters. Now, most Westerners would fiercely reject that level of intrusion. No way. But in China, it's largely accepted. It's seen as a rational trade-off. They give up privacy, and in return, they get a highly organized, totally crime-free society where daily friction is essentially engineered out of existence.
And the economic bedrock making that trade-off work is staggering. As our analysis points out, quote, there is no country in history that has lifted more people out of poverty faster than China. When a government delivers that kind of absolute economic marvel, massively improving health, housing, cleanliness, and nutrition for hundreds of millions of people so incredibly fast, the population becomes way more willing to accept strict, permanent limitations on their individual freedoms. To them, the tangible results totally validate the restrictive system.
All right, moving right into Section 3, history drives national order.
So why is this desire for order so powerful that a massive population just actively embraces total state surveillance? Well, to understand the why, you have to look at this timeline of immense trauma. We're talking about a true century of chaos. From the 1800s straight through to the 1970s, it was just unrelenting turmoil.
Extreme instability, the brutal Japanese invasion during World War II, a devastating civil war, mass collectivization, and then the extreme poverty and upheaval of the Cultural Revolution. Literally almost anyone alive in China today either lived through this suffocating chaos themselves or has parents and grandparents who are deeply traumatized by it. That memory of national collapse isn't abstract, it is practically tangible.
And that brings up a really fascinating concept from the sources, a sociological imprint. Basically, it's the profound, lasting psychological effect on a population that has survived extreme historical chaos. Because of that unimaginable instability, order isn't just some casual political preference or talking point. For the generations alive today, preserving national order is a foundational survival mechanism. They prioritize stability above absolutely everything else, because they know exactly what the alternative looks like. So when we in the West look at their massive surveillance apparatus, we see a tragic loss of individual liberty. But when they look at it, they see a necessary, hard-coded guarantee against famine, civil war, and national humiliation.
Now, let's jump to Section 4, the race for self-sufficiency.
Understanding that deep psychological drive for absolute security totally explains how they are trying to permanently insulate their tech and economy from Western leverage, and the timeline is aggressively accelerating. According to a highly consequential projection cited in our material, it's going to take just 10 years, a single decade, for China to go from being completely reliant on external microchips to almost totally self-sufficient. In the past, the core U.S. strategy was basically to withhold premier chip-making tech to slow them down and maintain dominance, right? But our sources note that this pressure actually completely backfired. It essentially forced China to pivot hard, aggressively dumping massive funding into their own domestic supply chains. By pushing them into a corner, the West actually catalyzed a drive for independence that now poses a permanent challenge to American technological dominance.
And this self-sufficiency goes way beyond just microchips. You know that old 2008 narrative that China is just a nation of copycats making cheap knockoffs? Yeah, you can consider that completely dead and gone. Western analysts practically scoffed at the Made in China 2025 plan back in 2015, but those ambitious goals are actively being realized right now. Take AI. Their native DeepSeek models are competing at top-tier levels, and they're doing it super efficiently through structural innovation, without relying on massive brute force computing power. Then look at renewable energy. They have total dominance in global solar manufacturing, and they've been incredibly strategic with foreign investments. They literally invited Tesla in to build Giga Shanghai, watch the EV supply chain get built on their soil, and then massively subsidize their own domestic market to compete and eventually dominate global auto exports. It is a masterclass in strategic leverage.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, a historic power shift.
Let's zoom out to the macro environment for a second, because this massive tech leap and completely divergent societal structure creates a dynamic the United States has literally never faced before. Our sources draw this fascinating historical analogy that just hits the nail on the head. We really shouldn't be comparing this to the Cold War. It's actually much more like the tense period right before World War I. Think of the U.S. as the British Empire, the apex power, the sprawling, established global empire deeply reliant on trade. Now picture modern China as the rapidly industrializing, highly disciplined pre-WII Germanic power. This is a pure competitor that genuinely matches the apex power in university research, in sheer industrial output, and in the volume of critical scientific patents. It's an adversary that can actually outbuild you.
And that is an absolutely crucial distinction that demands we update our mental models. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was primarily a military juggernaut, right? It had crushing weight and sheer size, but it was never this economic marvel capable of truly out-innovating the West in consumer tech, infrastructure, or renewable energy. Modern China is fundamentally different. We are now looking at a bipolar world featuring a true peer, someone who matches us in both economic miracles and frontier technology, with real potential for global soft power influence.
We are literally witnessing two entirely different operating systems for human society colliding in real time. One system prioritizes individual liberty, even if that sometimes means dealing with political gridlock, domestic friction, and messy infrastructure. The other system demands total digital surrender, but in exchange, it delivers hyper-efficiency, rapid modernization, and absolute, unwavering order. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to really chew on. As this unprecedented bipolar reality shapes the globe, how will these fundamentally opposed social contracts, these differing definitions of freedom, privacy, and order, shape your daily life and ultimately dictate the victor of the 21st century? Thanks for tuning in, and keep questioning the surface.